Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events. And today I have Erin McElroy with me. She is the Program Director of Executive Programs and Event Experience at IBM and was previously the Head of Innovation and Global Events. Erin, welcome.
Thanks, Matt. Glad to be here.
Yes, I'm glad you are here. I want to jump right into things. I think we have a really cool conversation. I want you first to tell people a little bit about your background with IBM.
Sure. I am a consultant by trade, and I happened into it through a university program in government, believe it or not, and was recruited by a consulting firm into tech consulting for governments. And that went to PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then IBM bought the consulting arm of PricewaterhouseCoopers. So I've been in the tech industry most of my career, and most of it building client solutions for customers and seeing the advent of the internet, e-commerce, mobile solutions, all of those exciting trends. And then the last 12 years, I've been in marketing, creating experiences for clients.
So let's talk. One of my favorite parts about this whole conversation we're going to have is that I think you have a unique background where you have a ton of experience in product, right? And for me, what I love about product is when you're creating product, when you're R&Ding on product, when you're selling product, all of that. I think you just learn so much about your customer. You have to, right? Because you have a
Absolutely.
product.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that for you rolled into events. So tell us a little bit about your background in product and how that kind of got you moved into events and then what that looks like.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so I spent a lot of time, I've done such a wide range of programs with clients. Like I was a taxonomy expert for Home Depot's first website,
Mm.
first e-commerce site, working with a bunch of different products as a consultant, looking at the best of breed, really always looking at and weighing what is the best for the customer, what's the best product to use. And then coming into IBM, that was an interesting situation. And our consultants deal with this today, where we have IBM products, and how do we take the best suite of the products that we have with niche products from other, and really bringing that together and integrating into solutions that meet client needs. So the client need and the customer need, and like you're saying, understanding their business is so important to really creating what they need. And so I really love that I had that product knowledge, because coming in with that mindset really helps you create experiences that are going to relate to them, and an event activations that will really click with them and create opportunities.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I feel like a lot of the conversations that we're constantly having or in the event marketing community is that I don't want to say experiential side, but it's trying to give people say, hey, from the jump, you need to understand the customer, you need to understand the audience in order to put on a good event, in order to build a great trade show booth, in order to run a good activation, whatever it may be. So tell me a little bit, because of your product background, how has that really allowed you to accelerate things at IBM with the events, experiential activations, and everything that you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So how I actually got into events really tells that story. I was actually working in product marketing and in category marketing. We were launching our
Mm.
social business category and all of the associated products with that. And I came to one of our events, and I saw that we had, and this was about 10 years ago. We had an agency solution that was on display showing social feeds and everything that was really hot at the time. And I realized, hey, wait a minute. I just brought in a business partner who actually runs everything on our cloud, runs everything on our systems. And the agency solution we were showing was really great in terms of inspiring what's possible. But when clients were asking, hey, where can I buy that? Our answer was, oh, whatever. There's an agency we could connect you with. And in the astute mindset of our leaders in global events, she basically said, help us figure out how to go and showcase our own technology. And I think that created a whole paradigm shift in how we in global events look at the experiences that we create. It used to be something that draws attention, that really shows what's possible but the aspect of, wait, our technology does this piece of it or that piece of it, and really figuring out the best way to showcase our technology, because often people will just show a demo. Let me show you a demo of what I've
Yeah.
done. And honestly, there's a real investment aspect of this where how much money can I spend on doing an activation like that when I have this demo for this client I just did? But that's
Mhm.
not as interesting, right? As when you create a more immersive, more creative, taking it to the next level kind of inspiration. And so I've really spent the last 10, 12 years looking at how to showcase our technology in a creative and innovative way that gives that fun, amazing, inspiring experience, but also shows the powerhouse of the technology stack that we have.
So I really like what you said there about showcasing the technology in a creative and innovative way. You're basically getting people, what I'm hearing you is to engage with your technology in a way that they will remember, in a way that will be unique and different, but they're also using the product itself. What kind of advice do you have for, say, an event marketer, anybody putting on an event or any activation that maybe doesn't have the product background, but like how can they maybe take that approach? Where should they start? Where should they begin?
I think the best place to start is talk to your sellers. What pain do they have in trying to sell this technology?
Love
What
that.
what e e that is a gold mine, talking to your sellers, because they're dealing with it every single day, and they're taking the assets that you already have for them, and they're trying to get the point across. They're pitching it all the time, and they're hearing what the customers are saying. "I don't get this," or "I don't understand that," or "How did you do this?" And that is really a great place to inspire a lot of thoughts on how to relate. I think the other thing is to be culturally aware about your audience. This goes back to what you were saying before. The basics and the foundations of great marketing is knowing your audience. And
Yeah.
a lot of times we think it's some kind of magic formula. Sometimes it just comes down to that. What is happening in the world? For example, generative AI is the big buzzword now. IBM has been doing generative AI for decades. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's rebranded. It's gotten all this attention because of Chat GPT. And so we have to really understand, even though been doing it for a long time, we can't just assume that everyone knows that or just go out to market the way we have. We have to adapt to what
Mhm.
the cultural conversation is. So it's understanding where your audience is, understanding what they need, and then also making sure that you're being relevant and just in time with how you're messaging what you have to offer.
I think a lot of what I just heard you say is you can't be tone deaf. Like, you
Right.
gotta have
Or
a grip
navel
on
gaze.
things.
Or navel gaze.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for a long time, and we've already been
Mhm.
doing it, so I don't need to say it again. I've been saying it. You need to say it again. You need to say it in a different way. You need to really keep things fresh. It's important to keep things fresh. And there's following and there's leading. And often when you get comfortable, especially in a certain space, you think, oh, I've said this before. It's worked before marginally. Yeah. Always have to, so important to always be rethinking how you're communicating and how things are coming across, reevaluating that, rethinking that, and being a pioneer. And that takes calculated risk. It takes guts. There's sometimes that you do need to just continue along, but if everybody else is doing something, how can you show up differently? How can you flip the script and be unique and be seen as different and new and fresh?
You said a lot of really great stuff there. The following part, the leading part, right? Like that. Are you following or are you leaders? This idea of like pioneer guts, risk, being unique. I love all that, right? Because it is saying you're breaking down, I feel like the idea of if you're doing your own homework and you're getting a grip on your audience, once you know that foundationally, now you can take the chances. Now you can shoot your shot a
Yeah.
lot of different ways and you can try to connect to them. Any Give
And
me a
look,
little more. Good.
I was just saying, and look, it's tough, especially when you're in a corporate environment, especially when you've got a book of business that's running really well on what's being done. There's no incentive to really
Yeah.
change that. But we all know if you're an innovator, if you're a person who knows how these cycles progress, you know that there's going to be an end to that, right? So I'm a person who I'm always thinking about, okay, how can I take us higher? How can we really innovate? And that's a really tough sell a lot of times. And people are going to think you're crazy. I used to be thought of as the one with the crazy ideas. And now people come to me for crazy ideas
Mm,
because,
yeah.
and some have worked really well and some have not. And so, just as in using traditional things too, like when you have a traditional program that doesn't perform, it's because we didn't change it. When you have an innovative program that doesn't perform well, that's because we did
Mhm.
this crazy thing. And so it takes a lot, like I said, a lot of guts and a lot of just calculated innovation.
What would be your advice for, say, a director of events, experiential brand manager, whatever the title is, right? There's a lot of titles for these roles. What would be for somebody maybe been doing it 4, 5, 6 years, they're given a shot. They don't have the background where they have the 10, 15 years to say, hey, these are my thoughts. Trust me. What would be your advice to get them to go to leadership and get buy-in on being innovative, on taking a risk, on pioneering?
I think one of the things I like to do is really stay active in various experiential communities and stay aware. It's kind of like the best people I see in this on the agency side, on the marketing side, are people who live and breathe this and are really excited about it. You have to have a passion for it. And because it's changing so quickly, you have to keep your finger on the pulse. And so I think one of the things I try to do is here are some examples of where brands that that you respect have done these quote unquote crazy things, okay, that have seen great results. So having some data to support what you're suggesting, sometimes you won't have some data to support what you're suggesting. So you can also get brands or partners that also think it's a good idea. Internally selling concepts is often very tricky when it's something innovative and new. I've had a little practice. I have a permanent callus on my forehead from beating my head against a wall. And it does take a lot of just continuing to let things roll off your back and choosing your, I don't know if battle is the right word, but choosing what you're really going to lean in on and then letting some things go. But I think definitely it's sound to have examples that you see in market that have been successful that you can point to, and then other partners who have done similar things or will go in with you on an idea.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I like it because I encourage people all the time to push the boundaries inside of their company because I think events is this weird, whether it's trade show activation, events, summits, whatever, you name it, where companies get very stuck in their ways. And it's, oh, we've always done it this way. We've always, and it's, they don't treat it like a true channel anymore. It starts off as a channel because they're like, oh, we should do events to do A, B, and C. And then it just goes into, oh, we always do this versus saying, hey, if you're using a channel for sales and marketing, you're trying new stuff. You're mixing things up. You're say this works, we're going to keep doing it. This stopped working, we're going to cut this, we're going to try something new. So I think that's really good advice for someone that's coming in. So when you and I originally talked and we were chatted, one of the things I loved that I felt like we hit it off on was this beginning with the end in mind concept.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is a word. I think we joked about it. Intentionality. I use it. It's not a word. It is now. I don't know. But beginning with the end in mind and intentionality. And I just want your thoughts on why you think those things or those concepts are important when it comes to events, being experiential and being innovative.
Yeah, I think I talk about this and I feel like this is so obvious. And it's not so obvious. It's like kind of like common sense, not so common, but being intentional about an experience. Like, for example, we had an experience one time. It was a candy machine. You got to go in, it was in the middle of the booth, drew a bajillion people into the booth. Did
Mhm.
it draw the people we wanted? Probably not. That and it and we the data showed that it didn't perform like other activations that we've if your intention is just to draw random people and get a bunch of people in the booth, and maybe you need that because you want some attention, okay. But what was the intention behind that? That was many years ago that we had something like that. Now, every single time we go into, and I'm so fortunate that I have leaders that are intentional about our strategy as an events organization, that we have to have intention in everything. What industry, what audience, what do we want out of this? Do we want leads or do we just really want people to love us as a brand? And so,
Mhm.
and both of those have very value. So
Yeah.
it's not always the same thing. So intentional about what is your objective And then, okay, how am I going to achieve that? And what are some unique ways that I can do that? And one example is the customer care activation I was sharing with you, which I think is a great example of taking a number of tactics that are very hot right now and telling a story without actually showcasing the technology, but emulating the technology. So we basically had a team come to us and say, we really would love people to understand Watson Assistant better, which is basically a tool that's used to enable intelligent virtual assistants. And I had for a long time been wanting to do some sort of gaming activation, to which many of the folks inside our company were saying, gaming, well, that's Fortnite, that's teenagers. What does that have to do? But our studies and our research has shown that gaming is so pervasive. It's a 10x billion-dollar industry. And CIOs, CEOs are gaming with whether it be logic games or whether it be more fun, experiential type games. At any rate, on the hunch of that, I said, okay, let's create this game that will allow us to emulate what the life of a contact center agent is. And they have to basically swipe to handle requests. And what we did was we layered in all of the different, again, as a metaphor, all the different features of Watson Assistant, like natural language, intelligent search, self-serve tasks, to the point where they in the game saw how much easier everything got. And we give them a performance, they get on a leaderboard, and then we show them what it was like with and without the automation. And I tell you, it has been such a big hit. And we had actually a CEO from one of our major brands. You would know them if I told you the name of the company. They had been being pitched Watson Assistant by some of our folks for a while. And he went through this game, and he's an executive senior level at NRF, went through the game and said, I get it now. Now I get it. Okay. And we actually had a follow-up jumpstart project with him and that team. And the intention of that activation was that people would walk away understanding the various components of automation and AI that Watson Assistant does. And it accomplished that. And it wasn't a demo that you sit there and you're looking at a screen and all the details. It was a fun, competitive game, visually beautiful. And it tapped into what we know is something that really attracts people right now. And that's gaming, as well as being competitive. So we looked at kind of the attributes of that individual we're trying to reach: competitiveness, fun, beautiful, digital. We looked at all of that, and we looked at how we could do this at a top level to really drive the interest to go deeper. So it's a long description of that, but I think it's a good example of how we didn't really know what we were going to do when we started. We were just like, we want it to be a game. We know we want these things to come out. Let's just iterate and work through how we can. And it was a 4-minute experience, and then it became a 2-minute experience. And so we really just worked through that and iterated on those elements and I think achieved the goal.
I like how your engagement works through your value proposition to a degree on this specific. It's product based, and something that like we talk about with our clients in trade shows all the time is they come to us and they're like, oh, we want to do this and this. I'm like, cool, great idea. What does it have? It has nothing to do with the problem that you solve for your customer. And how can I'm all for engagement, but how can we find something like that story alone on such a larger enterprise style account that would be for a CEO, I think you said, or a COI, to see that and be like, oh my gosh.
Or a contact manager or a developer who's building those solutions internally. Oh, wow, we could actually use this. I get it. And the other aspects of that activation, it has a display experience that shows a sample Watson-enabled virtual assistant, along with proof points saying you can save 30% on your call hold times. And so it has for someone who's not actually playing, who is, oh, I don't want to get into the game, I just want to watch this. They can see all the gameplay, they can see the competition going, and they can see actually what comes out of it. So we really designed it specifically for the player who's interested in it, or someone who just wants to watch it and see the results. And we also have a web app. So our sellers, I've had an SVP reach out to me and say, I'm meeting with a client today. Where's that web app? So I can show it to them. And so he just pulled it up on his own
Yeah.
device. So we
Yep.
really, what, having been a seller, been in consulting and not had stuff to show clients, I was like, we got to get on that web app.
Yeah.
So I think it's been a really positive thing to see all those facets work. And yeah.
I like the two examples you gave in terms of story of talking about intentionality, beginning with the end of mine. You're saying like, okay, we did one thing that we're like, okay, we're going to draw people in, but we drew all the wrong people in. It didn't really have intention. It was just this thing that was cool. But then we did something with intention, and the results from that, like what it's possible to do in the in-person setting when you know what you're trying to gain, and then you build engagements or build themes and concepts around those. It's powerful. It's just
Yeah.
different.
And by the way, that was really predicated by talking to the sellers and them saying, people
Yep.
don't really get what Watson Assistant is, because a lot of people think Watson Assistant is a virtual assistant. No, it's the backbone to help you build intelligent virtual assistants, right? And so how can we show that? And we were able to show it. So that came from the feedback of talking to the sellers and finding out this is what they're struggling with. And it's just amazing that it's just come out now without all the talk about AI and automation. And it also shows how automation helps. Incidentally, another thing about that experience that a lot of the folks that we talked to and tested with internally, it's very frustrating at the beginning of the game because we start you off without Watson Assistant. So all of these requests are coming in. We're trying to give a person a taste of what it's like if you don't have that virtual automation. And from the lens of an event marketer, this is a frustrating game. Like, why would we want people to play it? But that's the whole point, because by the time they get to again, beginning with the end in mind, by the time they get to the end of the game, they go, oh man, that's so much easier. I get it. We had so many people say, I didn't realize there were so many things that went into a contact center agent having to answer a request. Yep. We're doing educating as well as showing the solution, the problem, and the solution in context.
Yep.
So all those things factor into whether you really achieve the objective.
It makes me think, I remember in a previous discussion we had too, we talked about connecting the dots for people. That's part of what you're doing in an event on the show floor, is you're trying to connect the dots. I know actually one of my sales reps told me the other day, we built this trade show booth for a client, and she was on the show floor just hanging out and seeing about they're a client, they do multiple shows. So she's trying to see what's going on in the booth and how things are working. And these two guys walked up to her and they were like, hey, what do you do? Cause she had the badge for our client.
Yeah.
So she's explaining their product. And then about a half hour later, one of the either executives at the company that we work with came over to her and was asking her questions. What's going on? Hey, thanks for the build. We're so happy, blah, blah, blah. And she tells him this story. And he's, oh man, we really got to work on this messaging, huh? And it's like because they don't know, by looking at the booth and being in the space and seeing the dots didn't connect.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting because the booth looked great. Everything was awesome. But now, like when we go back to the drawing board with them for show 2, 3, 4, whichever it is, that's the conversation where it's going to start is, okay, last time the messaging didn't work, and you got to connect the dots when you're in person for people, whether it's games or messaging or the experience. It's gotta connect the dots.
Yeah. And the fact that you say that, I think, is another kind of endorsement of what we've really done. I have to tell you, I love my job more than I ever have. I've spent the last 10 years driving innovation in our events organization, and it is a beautiful time to be here because we really have put into practice all of these best practices. And so I'm always I'm very honest to say, if we don't do something well, we don't do that well. But I have to tell you, we are doing this so well now. And one of the things that we've implemented last summer was this idea of the messaging, and the narrative is the center point of everything that we do. And you just gave the case for it. And so basically, one of the first events we went to was the Gartner CIO IT Expo, Symposium IT Expo. They changed the name a couple times over the years, but
that's the data expo. They run like a data one.
It's really for CIOs.
Okay.
Yeah. They run a lot of events, but the Gartner Symposium IT Expo is in Orlando, and we go to that event every year. And that's actually the place where I first made the case about the social wall, believe it or not.
Okay.
But so it's been a number of years that I've been involved in that event. But one of the things we did when we went there and we were applying this new idea of here's the narrative, and then everything is threaded through that.
Yeah.
Now, as an event planner, event marketer, I know that your folks out there are going to go, yeah, that's all well and good, sure, but it is really tricky to select a message, especially with a large corporation, and stay
Yeah.
true to just that message. But we have done that. And in the past, we'd have, oh, we've got this activation available and we've got this one available and we want to talk about cloud and data. And we've got this session that we want to do over here. And you try to make all those things fit. You have to be maniacal to make them truly thread. And we have actually done that where all of the events of the last, 8, 9 months, and think is going to be this way as well. We have a specific narrative that we've worked with analysts. We worked with Gartner on that narrative. We're working with the external market to understand what it is that's most important to those audiences. And then that is threaded throughout everything. The sessions support that. The demo stations. We don't have cloud data AI. We have in business partner for the future, automation at scale, whatever that business viewpoint or that business vernacular is being used instead of here's IBM and you all have to adapt to us, right?
Yeah.
So what's great is that messaging is very clear. And so people are coming, they know exactly what they're going to be hearing about. And so we may have 5 product demos under AI at scale or personalization at scale or whatever that is. We may have 5 or 6 products underneath that, but we're talking about the business challenge. We're talking about what the business objective is. And we're making sure everything is said in that context. All the activations underneath that messaging and demos are aligned, as well as sessions that will go into more depth, roundtables that will go into more depth, and the like. So it's so important.
It's really sharp. What you just said to me and those 2 examples you gave to me not remind me, but they come off to me as like category messaging versus like general, like you said, you're categorizing an entire section of a problem you solve with almost the category itself. You know what I mean? So it's, hey, this is the category for the problem that we're solving and what we're delivering to you.
We're speaking the language of the market and of our customers.
Yeah.
And we could be showcasing the same thing and having the same exact sessions and calling it something different, and it would not resonate as well.
Love that. The language on that is so important than the generic or the run through language. You're creating your own that almost describes it in a way. Like I said, it categorizes it. And then your audience is, oh, wait, that's
that issue.
I have that problem. Yep.
I'm going to fix that. Yeah.
Yep.
What did I do? What did that? Oh, yeah. Okay. And no one wants to be first at trying to solve these problems, right? So whenever we can say, we have an answer that we've done and we can work with you to look at your unique situation, but having that confidence that, wow, they've addressed that before in this situation, I might want to try them.
I even think I even like that even more on top of that, because that's part of the reason why people go to events and go to summits and conferences. They have a problem. They're looking to solve something that they have going on. Like most people who go, I've seen some polls that basically say one of the main reasons they go, they do have a problem that they are looking to solve that they're hoping to take out of that. Now, that might just be one thing. They typically walk away with more if it's good, but they're looking for that one thing. Okay, let's on the topic of intentionality, which we still don't know if it's a word or not, but we talked about NRF, right? Which is retail's big trade show, big expo in New York. Tell me a little bit about what you all did and trying to walk people through this as much as we can as an example.
Yeah. This is a perfect example. This is the 3rd event I was personally involved in, and I drove the experience for this event. And so basically we started with the narrative, and it was hybrid. Let me test myself. Hybrid retail. I'm not going to remember all of it. Anyway, I remember hybrid retail in particular, but there are four pillars to this narrative. And we literally had 4 pillars there. We had clients with us that were aligned to each of those. There were premier client solutions with each of those narrative pillars. And so we also created actually a demo station app that had those 4 narrative pillars on it. You could drill into it. So anyone from any device could take that with them on a QR code and the calls to action, as well as you just pulled it up and displayed it in the booth. So that was all synced up to make it very easy to
Mhm.
share and showcase. Demos were embedded into each of those narrative pillars. And then we had a huge LED screen that had stories behind each. We had four client stories and the narrative client story. I'm sorry, the narrative story describing the components of the narrative around hybrid retail, for example. And so all of those videos were on a loop, on a run of show, about 125 videos that were. So again, we're really emphasizing we had still photography, we had the digital app was being displayed on the stations, and then we had visual assets that were continuing to echo and reemphasize the narrative and the associated client stories. And then a big attract was that customer care or contact center challenge activation, which was leaning in on the customer care side of things. And then we had some fireside chats. And when we'd have fireside chats, we'd bring up the visuals of the portion of the narrative that was being discussed. So everything was really in sync and just continuing that stickiness to repetition, right? You hear it over and over. And we were sharing different facets from different angles of the story that we were trying to tell.
So what was at this trade show for y'all? What was the audience? You said you had 4 pillars, right?
Mhm.
Essentially. Tell me more about sort of those pillars.
So there was hybrid retail, adaptable supply chain, sustainability, and infrastructure innovation.
Okay.
And so those were the key pillars. And how we got to that narrative was again, talking to the sellers, talking to the consultants, talking to our retail industry experts. What is it in market that there's the most pain? And as you can imagine, the hybrid retail aspect coming out of the pandemic, the user experience for any retailer now is
Yeah.
very digital and needs to be seamless and is absolutely transformed, right? In terms of adaptable supply chain, all the supply chain issues that everyone's been facing. So really
Okay.
looking at solutions there to solve that. So again, where sustainability is something that everyone knows they need to do, would like to do. It can be expensive. Is there really an ROI on it? We have a point of view. We had just come out with an IBV study, our IBM business value team, with talking to CEOs and looking at what does sustainability mean. So we had both a point of view, and we know there's a
Mhm.
question in market. So we debuted that. And then infrastructure innovation is really just all about the power of technology and ensuring you have the right platform to make things happen. So we've really felt like those from our research were the key areas to discuss at NRF for that audience.
So you're going to a trade show and you're basically understanding your customers' pain points. You
Pretty
had
much.
4 essentially. You're building them into pillars, into experiences, into different bits of information that can be relayed in ways of engaging them, and then you're building a trade show booth around.
Yep. And then each one of those, each product that's associated with each one, like for sustainability, it'd be Envisi, right? For hybrid retail, it would be a number of our different content management solutions and also our design methodology and our
Mm.
consulting expertise and industry knowledge, right? So it's not just products in terms of actual software as a service, it's also our skills and our professional services, which is a third of our business, right? So each one of those narrative pillars also gets all of the associated underlying services and products that are related to it. And that's how we display the information. So it's given in context. And
On
and this is all underpinned by our Let's Create campaign. So, for example, all of the custom visuals and videos that we created and that I led the creative direction on had Let's Create statements that were associated. We have Let's Create campaign in general, but we have Let's Create statements that we've gone out to market by industry, by solution, and those are aligned as well.
what any, like, positive signals, results from that show, essentially? Like I said, describe the intentionality of how you arrived at this big investment. It's a trade show, costs a lot of money, you gotta build the booth, gotta get the space, you gotta sponsor all that cool stuff, but what kind of results or positive signals do you think you received from being there?
We got accolades from the NRF Foundation. we certainly heard it from our clients. Our booth was packed. There was not really anything as experiential as the customer care activation that I saw
Mhm.
on that floor. And I'm usually the first one to say, that thing was so cool. We should do something like that. But
Yeah.
so I really do think that all indicators from being on site were really positive. It takes, I'd say, about 3 months. We're probably really close to really taking a look at the data from it
Yeah.
and looking at what kind of impact it had. It's tough to actually compare that to pre-pandemic and to last year, because
Mhm.
last year about half of the exhibitors left from pulled out at the last minute areas. So it's hard to really tell year over year. We can look at the data. It's probably going to be a heck of a lot better than last year because attendance was down just coming
Yeah.
out of the pandemic in January of last year. But definitely we are hearing from analysts and from our clients and on-site with the booth scans and the booth
Mhm.
attention that we're seeing, that it's very positive how
It's
we're
good.
telling our story now and how we're really aligning everything.
It's good. I think you can tell we have this conversation quite a bit where measuring an ROI in that whole conversation is takes time. And it depends on your cycle. It depends on why you're there. It depends. Are you top funneling? Are you middle pushing to the bottom, bottom pushing out the bottom? Like, what do you, everybody, if you're really dialed into this stuff, you really have an understanding of what you're doing, say at a trade show. It could be an event too.
Yep.
But I always ask people, what are the positive signals that you see that you're looking for? And if you're a seasoned event person like yourself, when you're there, by the response, by the conversation, by people engagement, the way everything is working, like you said, their leads, conversations. There's just a lot happening that you can gain positive or negative signals from when you're
Right.
there,
And I love the
you
way you
know?
said positive or negative signals, because my leadership, and I'm sure the folks that are listening, they want to see what are the hard numbers.
Yeah, of
You know?
course. Yeah.
And really it is one of the things that we know we can measure, especially at a third party event, is scans. At our own
Mhm.
proprietary events, it's registration. And because that's tangible and it's hard, that's what people go back to. But it tells you just one itty bitty little part of the story, because you get 100 scans and they're the wrong clients and they're nobody who buys anything from you. You get one out of 100 scans and it's a $25 million deal. That's
Yeah.
great. In
Yeah.
fact, I have to tell you, I was involved in I launched an innovative event last year where this was our Think event. And we had a Think on tour, and I ran the executive programs for Think last year. And we had one site location where at the last minute, it took us about 3 weeks to put this together. I said, "Well, I know that client of ours has a great innovation studio." And the C-level executives loved when we took them to the MIT lab. They really loved that kind of destination kind of
Mhm.
experience. So let's ask this customer, that's a great customer of ours, if we could just use their venue. And we use their venue. We reuse some of the content that these clients had not heard before, that we just presented around thought leadership. We took one of our IBM executives from that. It was a group of, I think, 10 clients. We spent maybe $2,000 on a cocktail reception because the customer provided the venue. They were up there talking about our work together, about how great we are working together, which I didn't even anticipate and was amazing. So they're presenting this to the customer. It was a meetup with some refreshments, and we had a cocktail party, and that led to $25 million in business. If someone said, "Oh, you had 10 clients, 15 clients, and it only cost you this much," you can look at something like that and it seems, what's that going to do? And who cares? That's little compared to an NRF where you get 500 scans in your
Yeah.
booth. Sometimes it doesn't tell the whole story in terms of how many people that you have there. And I like what you said about you just feel it, because at NRF, when people are coming up to you, when they've seen a million different things and there's 50 people in the booth at one time, it's zany, it's crazy, and they go, "I love this. This is
Mhm.
amazing." Good. Because people don't bother, they
Yep.
come in and out and whatever. And they only really say that when unsolicited, when it's something that's moved them. And that's important. It's important.
Yeah. I think it's a cool thought there because one of the things is adaptability. Like how much can you adapt year to year, show to show? And I think look, those hard numbers that leadership wants to see from event marketing and all that's super valid. And I think you do have to have those things to
Absolutely.
back up your case. But those do take time. They also take time to figure out, in my opinion, because everybody's cycles and reasonings for being at the show. Do you have only prospects, customers? Which part, like I said, which part of the funnel? There's so much happening. I think events are really valuable, and a good event marketer starts to figure those pieces out. And then you can come up with one or two metrics to go back and say, hey, here's the hard numbers. But positive signals that I'm talking about is what allows you to be flexible, lean and mean, and change what you're doing. And you got to pay
And
attention.
evolve and innovate and improve.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what we're talking about is really incubating things. Let me
Yes.
learn from this. Let me look at the positive signals. Let me look at some of the things that didn't work so well.
I gave an example the other day. I forget what I was talking about. I don't remember because I talk a lot between this show and some of my videos. But I remember I was at a trade show years ago, and my wife has a friend who works for a company, and she was down at her trade show. She's in sales. She was there. I popped over to say hello. I'm hanging out for like an hour. We're having a drink. We're talking. We're catching up. And I'm sitting in this booth. It is prime time at this trade show. And they have this 20 by 20 big booth. They must have spent $100,000 on it. Nothing crazy, but certainly a substantial investment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, they have 3 demo stands built into this booth. And it was nice. It looked good. It was a well-built booth. We didn't do it, right? So I'm prying on her about who they're working with and all this stuff. And I said, hey, why have I not seen anybody at these 3 demo stands? I've been here for 2 hours from the time I arrived back. And they're just like shooting the shit at the reception desk, a bunch of people having these conversations. She starts telling me, we don't really give demos here. This is more about our leadership being here, our executives, and they're having conversations. And I'm like, this booth makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
Like,
have the comfortable couches and a nice bar if you're going to
what do you do?
Gracious.
Exactly. If this is if this is like your CEO, CMO, C whatever O is coming in here, and why wouldn't you build a space that embodies what you're doing there and what you're trying to accomplish per se, or what you're trying to do? Because then now you can get all the positive signals in the world. Because to me, those empty demo stands, those are negative signals. I'm like, what are these things doing here? And what are we doing here?
You must not have anything interesting to look at if no one's looking at it. Yep.
That would push me to say, let's make a change. And then you build an executive lounge as a booth or something, whatever. And if that doesn't work, or it works a little bit, you make change until you figure it out.
Yep, absolutely. And the metrics are so important to what we were talking about before. We actually have implemented Adobe and Salesforce and have a proprietary analytics enterprise all around it, where we look at its total multi-touch attribution. And we really want to understand our customers and what they need and where they're having conversations, what they're doing, how we're engaging with them. We don't want to come at someone who's been really investigating us and go, hey, nice to meet you. I know who you are. I've been to 3 of your events. So we really want to be informed when we come to our customers. And part of this whole planning the great event is planning what you're going to do after. How are you engaging and nurturing them after the fact?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we built into the station app that has all the narrative information is we have one single QR code call to action. There's one thing that you want this customer to walk away with. And then we have those accessible for everyone, so just in a laminated card, so that if someone comes by, they're like, I don't have time to go on it. You know what? Take this with you. And then they take it with them on their device, making it easy that way, as well as in the after follow-up communities or the email nurture.
Yes.
So being very intentional, part of our whole intentionality about making sure that you're planning to do the follow-up. It's not just it's too much to try to do that on a one-on-one basis kind of thing, having the standard way that it's done, and then, then applying the creativity to the individual. So
I'm going to change the name of the podcast to Intentional and Event Marketing at this point. I feel like I talk about it so much and bring it up so much, but that's a great point.
You could say intentionality. Is that a word?
Is that a word? Yeah. Because I feel even what you said about the afterwards is such a big thing. You could do all this work, and really just our whole conversation here, what's making me think about is, at least I know from talking to so many event professionals that do it right, is events are a lot of work, but they also reap big rewards when you do them the right way. But you got to put the work in on the
Yep.
front. And I feel like so many companies get stuck in this neutral gear where they don't want to put the work in because they've never seen big results, but they
Right.
never put the work in.
Right.
So and then there's some people out there that are just crushing it. Like they're just crushing their events. They're doing so well. They're building community. They're making sales. They're moving pipeline, building relationships, and doing a lot of good stuff. This is a good segue to talk about like the paradigm shift in events.
Okay. And intentionality is a word, the state of having
Perfect.
or being formed by an intention.
Thank you so much. And you think I could have looked that up. I've been talking about this for a while. Like I just don't, I say it all the time. And every time, like I think I said it like the first time I brought it up, I was like in the back of my mind, I'm like, is that a word? Because I feel like I'm like starting to sound real stupid because I used it like numerous times. People are like intentionality. What is this guy?
Anyway.
What's this guy? Yeah, what's this guy talking about? So paradigm shift in events, right? We talk about like targets have become super targets, prospects, whatever, customers have become very digitally savvy. So it's different. Virtual has entered the space because of COVID. It kicked it into kind of overdrive. Talk a little bit about how you think we can capitalize on the expansion of digital, but then also this resurgence of in-person.
Yeah. Before the pandemic, there's a certain audience, a certain generation of audience that if you said, hey, tweet something for our Twitter feed, they'd be like, Twitter? I don't do that. And so the silver lining, I always say this, the silver lining of the pandemic is it made everybody digitally savvy. Ordering your groceries online, the whole, really seeing the whole purchasing experience and the defects in some of those, and then other retailers that did it well. Like I always, even though if you're a business to business company, you're selling to people. Okay.
Yep.
So now all these people are more digitally savvy. So the ways you take advantage of that, like, for example, the customer care activation and many other activations we're making sure there's a digital component because you're going to have a scenario where a seller is sitting there and say, hey, let me show you this, or hey, let me send you this link. And instead of in the past where a customer might go, I don't want to mess with that, right? They're like, oh yeah, let me take a look at it because they are more comfortable.
Yep.
And it's the realm that they're willing to go into because they've been living in it. So when we look at in-person and versus digital versus hybrid, to us, everything is hybrid now. Like in the past, we're an in-person event, we'd say we're digital, we threw up a live stream and that was it. The days of that are gone, right?
Yep.
Because there's so many opportunities because everybody's living in this digital space, living online on various platforms to basically seed what the event is about, promote them actually coming because it's going to take more now. There's so much information that's accessible now and so many webinars that are available, so many remote events, virtual events that people can go to. It really has to be something to get them on a plane. What are they really going to get on a plane to come see and do? I think we've all been surprised that more people are willing to do that now. I think everybody's kind of stir crazy, like, get out of the house. But still, there has to be value to that, right? So there are opportunities beforehand to talk to them about why it'd be great for them to come, to maybe pre-connect them, maybe even customize their agenda to what they want to see before they get there so they know exactly what they're going to be doing, and then maintain that connection after they leave the event. So I think all of those things are much more bigger opportunities for us now, just by virtue of the fact that the audience is more digitally savvy.
Yes, I guess to a lot of those things you just said. So tell me what you think about this. I've been thinking about this and talking about it a little bit. And I'm curious your thoughts on it. Based on the age ranges right now, millennials and Gen Zs are really starting to move into the buyer. They're starting to become the buyer just based on ages, right? And they will continue to be. So millennial and Gen Z will be the biggest buyer for most people for the next 20 years, really. And looking at them, where I see opportunity for our clients, for everybody that we're to talk to is, so they value experience.
I was just going to say that's the word that was coming about my head.
So for like
experience.
in person, they value experience, which to me goes to what you said, which is if you're going to get me out of my freaking house, you better give me an experience. And I love that. If you see the things that all take off, South by Southwest, things in that direction,
Mhm.
they're taken off because they're being provided this big experience. Then my thing on the virtual end of it is they want to be delivered things virtually.
Yes.
They're the Gen Zers don't know anything else. I'm a millennial. I'm the last breed at 37 years old to know what it's like to live without a cell phone. I genuinely remember it and I know what it's like to not need it. So right on the tipping point, but I'm also dependent on the phone now. So I think virtually we want that convenience. We want to do things. We're not going to do stuff in person that we could easily and more enjoyably
Don't
do
make me do that because, I'm
virtually.
gonna be done with you. Yeah.
Exactly. So for companies, my whole theory at this point is you need to separate them. And I had this awesome conversation with Sam Zelich. He works for Squarespace. He's a community manager. And he's our in-person events is now all about interpersonal connection is the term he used. Because that's why you leave the house. And I was like, man, that's pretty
Yeah.
solid. That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think authenticity, I think that audience really highly
Yep.
demands, has a high expectation of
Yep.
experience, personalization, authenticity.
Authenticity piece, you're so spot on, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And also personality. What's the personality of your brand? It's not just about what you're doing. Do I think you're cool? Do I think that you're changing the world? Do you have the character that is aligned with me as a buyer, as a
Yeah.
company that I'm representing? Those things are so important. And so that gives you opportunities in the experience that you're creating. What are the cause-based elements of what you're showcasing at your event? What are you allowing them to participate in? How are you personalizing things for them so they feel like, oh, that gets to the authenticity. Oh, they know
Yeah.
me.
Yep.
Oh, okay. That's cool. That's a surprising element. It used to be really surprising. Now it's almost an expected element.
Yeah.
So it's understanding your audience. They have
Back to
those
the beginning. We're full
things.
circle here. We're back
Yeah,
to the
we're full
beginning. Yep.
circle. It's understanding that it's different.
Mm.
And what are the things that, whereas the more seasoned senior audience is going to be like, show me how you did it. Show me the tangible proof
Mhm.
that it's been done.
Yep.
And the millennial audience is going to go, okay, that's table stakes, but what's your footprint? What's your impact on the environment? What's
Yep.
your ethics in terms of your production and the way that you're affecting the human condition? And by the way, I'm bored with this session thing that you're doing. Make it about me. Sorry, but that's part of it.
Yeah.
Make it about me.
I
Let
agree.
me contribute. Let me have a voice in what you're doing. And a
Mhm.
lot of what we do in experiences is we say, let's do some co-creation. Let's give an
Yeah.
opportunity for attendees to have their say or have their creative contribution to something.
Yeah. And that goes back to interpersonal connection, letting people collaborate, discuss, talk. Like one of the best things I've seen at one of my industry events is having the younger generation work and talk with the older generation. Like
Mhm.
I got into a conversation at a lunch table once with a young woman, 24 years old, working fully remote for a company with her whole view of the universe in front of her, how she sees everything. And
Mhm.
then she's sitting at a table with, I'm a 37-year-old millennial, but I'm also a business owner. So I have staff and team. And then she's sitting with somebody who's a friend of mine who's probably in his late 50s, early 60s, been around the block a few times, knows it's this interesting conversation I listened. And that collaboration, it was an excellent conversation about views on the world and the way things have changed and the direction that they're going. And you don't get that virtually. You just don't.
Yep.
You don't have
Yep.
that conversation, I don't think.
Yeah.
What kind of shifts do you see with events, with all the big stuff you're doing and everything IBM is doing? What kind of shifts do you see in events, either that can be capitalized on or just in general, things that you think we will see in events as time goes on?
I think we're seeing a lot of what we have seen in the past. There are a number of different events that are still saying the large sessions, one-on-ones, booths, that sort of thing. What we're trying to do is really go smaller scale, more authentic, those open connections. Having sessions, honestly, where you bring thought leaders together that have different backgrounds and maybe even different roles, like the CIO with the CMO, where we know there's tension, and bringing them together to connect on a human level in
Yeah.
just a networking experience. No programming, just let's bring y'all together. Let's have a chat. And that's one of the things I think that most event planners are least comfortable with, because wait a minute, we want them to walk away with this piece of information.
Yep.
Sometimes just getting them together and facilitating a conversation and being another person at the table is really powerful, because they don't forget that. So it's along the lines of the things we've been talking about that have been trending, that moments of authenticity, the memorable, inspiring moments, creating an environment where they're able to share their voice, because everyone really wants to share their voice and have their moment. So we're really gravitating to the smaller scale, more personal, where we can really give the attention. And we're really focusing on leaders, business leaders, even though we are a technology, professional services and technology company, we're really focusing in on business leaders. And yeah, we're changing up the way we do sessions and the way we do experiences in that way. I'll give you an example. At a previous Think, you could have 300 sessions. We have
And when you say think, you mean the IBM
the
event you're talking
IBM's,
about.
yeah, the
Okay. Yep.
IBM's Think that was 25,000 in 2019, I think it was. And
That's like a basketball game. That's like an NBA
yes,
basketball game.
yeah,
Number of people.
yeah. And this year at our flagship, it's going to be 3,000. And so we have some select keynotes, some select spotlight sessions, and we've basically created a showcase floor that at a trade show you'd think of as all booths, that has smaller stages as well as different experiential. They're not really booths, they're like neighborhoods that we've created that you can
Yes.
go into, and it's all immersive. And everything has digital activations, analog activations, a little bit of everything, so that we can really play to the different types of ways that people experience things, the different ways that things are communicated. If I'm a person who really maybe is more comfortable with the touch of something, then we have analog experiences. We have digital app experiences. We have visual and sound together. So we just really have a wide range of what we know is of interest. And we're making it a comfortable space to sit down, comfortable seating to have those kinds of conversations. So it's very different than what we've done in the past, where we had, here's the networking lounge, here's the expo floor,
Yes.
here's where you go to the session room.
Mm.
So we're trying to really showcase that threading of our narrative and all of the messaging in those different experiences together.
I like that a lot. It's good stuff. It's everything we've talked about, knowing the customer more, being more intimate, being the authentic term to me is really big. Trying to push brands to be super authentic and be themselves just all the time and really exude it. I think people really respect and cling to that. Okay, so I have a closing question on my podcast that I ask.
Okay.
And it's always one of my favorite pieces to hear people, but I typically get some great answers on this one. But it's
Pressure.
yeah, big time. Does not have to be. I have to clarify because some people want to answer it a set way, but nothing to do with events or anything like that. It's more of a professional question. It is, what is advice to your younger self professionally?
Oh, wow. That's a really good one. I would say the advice would be stay a student of life. And I feel like I've done that most of my life. But I think when I was younger, I was so passionate about my ideas that I often felt like I knew this is the right thing. And I would get upset when things wouldn't be adopted or received well. And I've learned to hold those things really loosely, those ideas that I have, because what I found is a lot of times it comes back around. Something that
Yeah.
I've said, I feel like I should do this, we should do this. I used to really fight, and the more you fight, the more people dig in their heels. And this is very important if you're an innovator. And now when I bring up an idea, if someone doesn't like it and I really feel okay, and it's not something that's going to make or break something, I just let it go and move on to the next idea because there's always going to be something else new. So staying a student of life, staying creative, staying innovative, and holding things loosely and knowing that even if a great idea isn't implemented in the moment, there'll be another opportunity. And if it's the right thing, if it's a good thing, and just trusting my instincts about those things and not letting naysayers or a no put out my fire, but just
Mhm.
let it light my fire more to come up with the next new great idea.
Nice. Erin, how can people find you if they want to, if they haven't already found you while they're listening to this, but how can they find you? Where should they find you?
On LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Perfect. And your last name is McElroy.
Yes. IBM.
Awesome. And
Yep.
Erin, first name is Erin, if people want to look her up. Erin, that was a ton of fun. I enjoyed a lot of your answers, if not all, but it's very obvious to me that you have a really good grip on the audience and delivering experience through narrative, story, and content and relayed with product, which I think is really cool with what you guys are doing. And I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks. I really love what I do. It's a really interesting world right now with generative AI and everything that's happening. And so I think as event marketers, we have a lot of fun ahead, a lot of interesting and scary times in terms of trying to figure things out. But I would say just do it afraid. And I love it. I really feel very blessed that I'm in this profession.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on. We really appreciate
Thanks.
it.
Thanks.